Have you ever had a feeling that was so good that you wished you could bottle it for later? Let's talk about how you can do that. Now, I think most of us have experienced that at some time, but we probably also realise that the feeling doesn't stick around forever. The memory of what gave us that feeling, we keep that, but over time, the feeling tends to fade. I had a conversation with one of my friends this morning, and she'd done something at the weekend that was a huge personal achievement for her. And she said this morning that she's still feeling amazing and hopes that she always feels like that. So what a perfect opportunity to let's talk about a technique that you can use to make that happen. I'm pretty sure that you'll have experienced this phenomenon at least once, probably more than once. There's lots of different ways that it shows up. Let's talk about 3 of the most common. I'm sure you'll recognise at least one of them. Has there ever been a time when you're driving along with the radio on and a song comes on the radio unexpectedly and suddenly it transports you back to a different time? And when that happens, it's not usually a general time, it takes you back to a specific moment. It could be something like the time you were sitting in the student union bar and one of your friends turned around to you, looked at you and said, "I hope that we'll always be friends." And when that happens, all of the feelings that you were experiencing then come flooding back to you. And usually when this happens, it often takes us back to a time that we haven't thought about for maybe 5, 10, 20, even 30 years. And suddenly the act of that song coming on the radio puts you back in that moment. Smells can do this really strongly as well. Have you ever walked down a street and got a whiff of a perfume and suddenly that kind of evoked a feeling in you? And you might not know where that feeling came from. There might not be any conscious memory that's associated with it, but you just know that there's a connection between smelling that perfume and the way that you're feeling. One of the other ways that this shows up that's not quite so helpful, is there anybody who ever gives you that look? And you probably know what I'm talking about, that you're feeling fine, everything's good, and then someone gives you that look and it changes the way that you feel. It puts you on edge, it kind of sets your teeth on edge. Or it could be a word that someone says, or even a tone of voice. And somehow, although you were feeling great before, because of something that happened, it's almost like you're hijacked from the outside and suddenly your emotional state has changed as a result of it. I'm sure that you recognise at least one of these, if not all 3 of them. And we call this phenomenon anchoring. You're being anchored back to a different feeling, a different emotional state. And there's an external trigger that causes that anchor to happen. So in the first case, the trigger was the song coming on the radio. The anchor was that moment back in the student union bar and the feeling that went with it. In the second example, the trigger was the perfume and the anchor was the feeling that you got. In the third case, the trigger was that look or that tone of voice that somebody used, and the anchor was the being on edge state that put you into. So these are all examples of anchors that have just built up on their own. It's almost like they're things that are happening without your permission. So let's have a look at how you can use this deliberately to create some anchors that you do want. The first thing we've got to do is we've got to figure out the exact moment, the exact feeling that we want to get anchored to. And the second is to create a trigger to make that happen. So in the case of my friend at the weekend, the kind of questions that I'd be asking her is, what was the exact moment where you got that feeling first, or where you got that feeling the strongest? Now, the thing that she did, it involved being on a stage. So was it before you went on the stage? Was it when you were standing on the stage before you began to speak? Was it while you were speaking? Was it after you'd spoken and the audience applauded you? Was it when you walked off the stage? Or was it some point later when you kind of were able to take the whole thing in? What is the point where you can get that feeling back the strongest? Because in order to anchor it, we need to be able to bring that feeling back. And luckily this has happened recently enough that just by thinking over it, should be able to get the feeling back really easily. But it's important to find the exact moment where that feeling is the strongest. So now that we've got a moment to anchor back to, we've got to create a trigger to get us back there. There are lots of ways to do this. I find that one of the best is to come up with a word or a short phrase and a physical action. And it's the combination of the two together that must be completely unique that take us back to that anchor. So the questions I'd be asking my friend is, what is that feeling? What is Describe it to me. Tell me what it's called. Give it a name. Is it a feeling of feeling powerful? Is it like walking on air? Is it feeling a sense of achievement? What is it? And it has to be something that means a lot to you. The second thing is to come up with a physical action, and it needs to be something that's unique, that you wouldn't normally do in everyday life, but it also needs to be something that's inconspicuous enough that you can do it when there's people around if you need to. An example one of my friends uses when he speaks to large groups of people, you see him just as he's walking onto the stage, he'll go, ready. And if you're not looking out for it, you could completely miss that he's doing it. It's very inconspicuous, but that's his anchor to get him back into that state of being slightly larger than life and ready to talk to a room full of people. So the way to use this is to have your word and have your action, and then get yourself back into the moment, that exact moment where you've got that feeling so strong. And the easiest way to do this is just imagine yourself being back there as if it's happening to you now. And once you get that feeling coming back, once you've got that feeling strong, then you ready. You use your action and you say your word, and you're starting to create an association in your mind between the two. And then you walk away, you think about something else for a second, and then you come back and you do the same thing again. It's like charging a battery up. You get yourself back into that state and you ready. You create that association again. And you're conditioning yourself to every time that this trigger fires, it takes you back into that anchored situation. So to use this, all you do is you think yourself back in that situation, you use your physical action and you use your trigger word, and it'll take you back into that feeling. The more that you've prepared this, the stronger that you've made it, the more powerfully it will take you back into that situation. And it's like a muscle. The more that you use this, the stronger it becomes. The more that you use the anchor, the more benefit you'll get from it. So what other areas of your life would it be useful for you to be able to get yourself back into a specific emotional state at will? Once you've thought about that, start to notice other people using anchors as you go about your day. One place where anchors are used extensively is by sports people. Think of a football player before they take a penalty. It's very common for them to put the ball down and do something like look at the ball, look at the goal, and then tap the floor 2 or 3 times with their toe before they take the penalty. Now that is not an accident. That's an anchor that's been built up with the help of a very expensive sports psychologist. And what will generally happen is they'll be put in a room and there'll be played videos of every time they've taken a penalty and scored, and at the same time there'll be some highly emotive music playing. And when they get back into that state of complete focus, that state of believing that they can score that goal and they will score that goal, they then build up the anchor. And then every time that they go onto the field, they go through the same, it's kind of a ritual in a way, isn't it? They go through the same ritual, but by doing that, it gets them back into that same state of focus. And that's what you can use to bottle a feeling and keep it. Here's an interesting question for you though. Remember we said earlier about when someone gives you that look? That's a pretty unhelpful anchor, isn't it? It's almost like somebody else is in control of the way that you feel. What if there was a way that you could reprogram unhelpful anchors? Maybe that's something that we'll talk about in a future video.